Somewhere between the rush to become and the fear of not being enough, the meaning of happiness was quietly misplaced. It isn't a destination waiting to be conquered, nor a prize earned through perfection. It's the still breath between thoughts, the warmth that returns when you stop trying to control every outcome. Real happiness is what appears when the mind softens and the soul remembers its own light. In the silence between desires, a calm truth begins to whisper you were never missing anything. This is where joy begins, not through pursuit, but through presence. Welcome to the art of being truly happy. There comes a day when the noise inside you grows louder than the world outside. You try to silence it with goals, distractions, and endless motion. But something deeper keeps calling your name. It is not the voice of ambition or fear, it is the quiet ache of truth waiting to be seen. The running has lasted for years, perhaps lifetimes, yet no finish line ever appears. You begin to sense that what you've been escaping was never an enemy at all, but a forgotten part of your own soul asking to be heard. The moment you pause, time itself seems to exhale. Every unfinished thought and unspoken emotion rises like dust in sunlight, finally visible. It is uncomfortable at first standing face to face with the weight of your own being. Yet, within that discomfort lies the seed of something sacred. You start to see that peace was never missing. It was merely hidden beneath the layers of your avoidance. The silence you feared now begins to sound like home. You remember how often you filled emptiness with noise, endless scrolling, shallow victories, borrowed opinions. You thought movement meant progress, but it only pulled you farther from yourself. The truth is, what you were running from never wanted to harm you. It only wanted your presence. It waited patiently for you to stop, to listen, to acknowledge that the healing you seek will not come from escape, but from returning inward with honesty. When you stop running, you begin to feel again. Not the kind of feeling that demands reaction, but the gentle awareness that arises when you allow emotions to exist without defense. Sadness, regret, and fear, all of them stand in line, no longer chasing you but waiting for your acceptance. You realize that running made them stronger. Stillness disarms them. You do not conquer your feelings, you welcome them, and in doing so, they lose their power to control you. For the first time, you taste the strange sweetness of surrender. You are not trying to fix, prove, or win anything. You are simply here, breathing, noticing. The old identities you wore, the achiever, the pleaser, the survivor, begin to slip away like dust in rain. You discover that the person you were trying so hard to become was never as real as the quiet awareness witnessing it all. In that realization, you begin to rest in yourself without fear. As you rest, something beautiful unfolds. You start to see your own contradictions not as flaws but as poetry. The strength and the softness, the doubt and the courage, they coexist in you like night and dawn, sharing the same sky. You stop labeling parts of yourself as good or bad and start seeing them as necessary pieces of a larger wholeness. You understand now that happiness is not perfection, it is reconciliation with your own humanity. There is a freedom that arrives when you stop chasing the version of yourself you think you should be. The mind loosens its grip, and the heart breathes again. You realize that being human means being in constant evolution, yet beneath every change, something eternal remains untouched. That still presence within you has never needed improvement. It only needed recognition. You find peace not by becoming new, but by finally seeing what has always been there. The day you stopped running, you stopped fighting time. You no longer look backward with blame or forward with desperation. You begin to understand that life doesn't unfold according to your plans, but according to your readiness to meet it. You see beauty in delays, lessons in detours, and purpose in pauses. The same moments that once frustrated you now feel sacred because they taught you patience, the purest form of acceptance. Now the world around you feels slower, not because time has changed, but because you have. You no longer move from fear of missing out, but from a calm curiosity. Every step becomes deliberate, every breath a prayer. You sense that life was never asking you to run faster. It was asking you to be present enough to feel where you are. In presence, happiness ceases to be a pursuit. It becomes a natural reflection of awareness. In facing yourself, you find compassion for others. You see that everyone is running in their own way, from pain, from truth, from silence. But instead of judgment, your heart fills with understanding. You realize that empathy is born not from shared stories, but from shared stillness. The more you accept your own humanness, the more gently you hold the world. You stop wanting to change people and start inspiring them simply by being whole. Each morning feels different now. You wake without the urgency to prove anything. The sun rises, not as a race against time, but as a reminder of renewal. You start cherishing simplicity, the warmth of tea, the sound of birds, the rhythm of your own breath. What once felt ordinary now feels divine. It's as if happiness was always waiting in these quiet corners, unseen while you were busy searching elsewhere. You begin to laugh at the irony of it all, how long you ran to find what was always within reach. The path inward was the only road that never moved. You realize that awareness is not a skill to master, but a return to natural being. You stop asking, "When will I be happy?" and start living in the questionless state of presence. There, happiness is not an achievement. It is the pulse of existence itself. You still stumble back into old patterns, rushing, overthinking, resisting, but now you catch yourself. Awareness brings grace. You forgive yourself not because you've become perfect, but because you finally understand that growth is not linear. Each time you fall, you rise with softer eyes. The journey inward never truly ends. It only deepens, and that depth is what gives life meaning. As you grow quieter inside, the world around you begins to mirror that peace. The people, the challenges, the unknown, they no longer dictate your inner weather. You learn that mastery is not control, it's surrender. True power lies in gentleness, and true happiness in allowing. You become the calm within the storm, untouched yet fully alive within it. Life becomes less about seeking and more about seeing. At the one who used to run, the one filled with fear and longing, you no longer feel shame. You feel gratitude. That version of you carried the fire that led you here. Without the running, you would never have known the joy of stopping. Without the search, you would never have discovered what was always waiting inside. And so, you smile, because now you understand the journey was never about escaping yourself. It was about finally coming home. There comes a time when life stops dazzling you with the complicated. You begin to notice how peace hides in the smallest things. The sound of water, the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of sunlight touching your skin. What once felt insignificant starts to glow with meaning. The world does not need to change for you to feel joy. Your eyes only need to soften enough to see what was always pure. Happiness was never hidden. It was simply overshadowed by excess. You spent years collecting more plans, more dreams, more validation. Yet the more you gathered, the heavier life became. You mistook abundance for fulfillment, mistaking possession for peace. But somewhere along the way, a quiet truth whispered through the noise. Asterisk, the simpler the moment, the clearer the heart. Asterisk, in letting go. You begin to understand that contentment is not about owning much, but about needing little. The mind is trained to complicate everything it touches. It measures worth through comparison, turning stillness into laziness and simplicity into lack. Yet when you step outside of its grasp, you discover that simplicity is not poverty, it is richness without dependence. It allows joy to breathe freely, unchained from conditions, you begin to see that the quieter life becomes, the more vividly you can hear your own soul. True simplicity is not about retreating from the world, but about returning to the essence of things. It is tasting water as if for the first time, walking without rushing, listening without the urge to reply. It is not an act of minimalism, but of awareness. Every moment becomes complete when you stop asking it to be more. Happiness begins to wear the face of simplicity because simplicity holds no demands, only presence. There is beauty in the ordinary that once escaped your attention. The scent of rain on earth, the laughter of a stranger, the softness of evening light. These are the quiet miracles you once overlooked while searching for grand meaning. When the heart is simple, everything feels sacred. You no longer divide life into important and unimportant moments. All of it becomes holy, because all of it is fleeting and real. Simplicity teaches gratitude without effort. When you have less to chase, you have more to notice. The small gestures of kindness, the humble rhythm of routine, the silence between conversations, these become treasures that wealth cannot imitate. The soul does not crave grandeur, it craves peace. And peace grows only in uncluttered spaces in a room, in a thought, in a heart that has learned how to rest. In the world's noise, simplicity is rebellion. To live gently is an act of quiet strength. You begin to realize that complexity often hides fear. Fear of being unseen, unheard, or unimportant. But simplicity has nothing to prove. It stands on its own, radiant in its calm, content in its silence. To live simply is to trust that nothing more is needed for this moment to be enough. The art of simplicity is the art of returning. Returning to what matters, to what breathes, to what nourishes. It is realizing that the joy you seek cannot be manufactured, it can only be remembered. Simplicity is the soul's way of clearing the fog, revealing the mountain that was always there. You stop seeking happiness through change and begin to find it in clarity. With simplicity comes freedom. The freedom to feel without filtering, to love without performing, to live without the weight of too many expectations. You stop wearing layers of identity and step into authenticity. You begin to see that peace is not hidden in the future you hope to build, but in the simplicity of being honest now. The less you pretend, the lighter you become. There's a moment when you look around and realize that nothing external has changed, yet everything feels new. The cup, the chair, the morning light, all familiar, but seen through awakened eyes. Simplicity sharpens perception. It allows you to experience the world directly, not through the fog of judgment. The more you simplify your perception, the more vividly life responds. Simplicity also reveals how little control is truly needed. You begin to trust the natural rhythm of things. Not every plan must be perfected, not every problem solved today. You learn to leave space for grace to move. Happiness, you realize, flows not from mastering life, but from allowing life to master you gently, patiently, beautifully. When the heart becomes simple, relationships do too. You no longer demand others to complete what you have not found within. You love freely, not to fill a void, but to share your overflow. Conversations deepen, gestures soften, and silence between souls feels full instead of empty. You understand that love, like happiness, thrives where simplicity reigns. Simplicity asks for courage. The courage to release what does not serve your peace. The courage to say no to noise disguised as opportunity. The courage to walk slower when the world insists on running. In that slowness, you rediscover rhythm, balance, and meaning. You see that happiness was never complicated, only your pursuit of it was. The more you simplify, the richer your experience becomes. You start to measure abundance not by quantity, but by clarity. How deeply you feel, how fully you see, how sincerely you live. Every breath becomes enough, every heartbeat a blessing. In this simplicity, happiness no longer hides behind achievements. It lives openly in the space you create by letting go. As life unfolds, you begin to understand the quiet truth. Happiness does not arrive dressed in luxury or noise. It walks barefoot, carrying nothing but presence. It smiles through ordinary moments and whispers through the calm of acceptance. When you meet life in its simplest form, you finally recognize happiness not as something to gain, but as something that has been quietly waiting for you all along. There is a quiet place that lives between desire and acceptance, a space few visit willingly, yet all must cross. It is the moment after reaching and before receiving, the silence between what you crave and what simply is. In that gap, the mind trembles, the heart argues, and the soul waits. You feel suspended, uncertain, unanchored. Yet this is where truth begins to breathe in the emptiness that lies between wanting and being. The world teaches you to want endlessly. It calls desire a virtue, ambition a map to meaning. But wanting without stillness becomes hunger without end. The more you reach outward, the less you feel rooted. You begin to confuse movement for progress, forgetting that fulfillment doesn't come from possession, but from presence. What you long for is not more things, but the peace that comes when longing itself dissolves. Between wanting and being, there is tension, the tug of two realities. One pulls you forward, promising satisfaction in the future. The other invites you to stay, whispering that everything is already whole. The struggle is not external, it is the friction of a mind that cannot sit with silence. But the more you allow this stillness, the more it reveals. It shows that peace is not earned, it is uncovered in the space where effort ends. When you live constantly in wanting, life becomes a chase. Every joy fades quickly because it was built on anticipation, not arrival. You begin to see that wanting is an illusion of distance, a belief that what you seek is apart from you. But in truth, there is no separation. The happiness you seek is not ahead of you, it is beneath the layers of restlessness that make you run. The moment you stop grasping, you begin to feel its presence. Being is the quiet opposite of striving. It asks nothing, proves nothing, and competes with no one. It simply allows. To be is to surrender the argument with reality, to let life unfold without needing to fix it. It feels strange at first, too gentle for a world that praises control. Yet once you taste it, even briefly, you understand why every teacher of wisdom spoke of stillness. Being is not laziness, it is alignment. There is humility in being, because it accepts that not everything needs to happen now. You begin to see beauty in pauses, meaning in uncertainty, and lessons in waiting. You stop demanding from the universe and start listening to its rhythm. In that listening, the space between wanting and being becomes sacred, a meeting ground between your humanity and your divinity. In this space, you encounter your truest mirror, your own expectations. You realize how much of your suffering was born from the idea that life should unfold differently. The more you wanted control, the more peace slipped away. But when you release control, life flows again effortlessly, naturally. The need to force outcomes fades, replaced by trust. You understand that surrender is not weakness, but wisdom. Desire has its purpose. It moves you, inspires you, creates expression. But when desire rules you, it becomes a cage. Between wanting and being lies discernment, the ability to want without worship, to dream without despair. You can still reach for things, but now you do so with grace, not desperation. The heart learns to hold both ambition and contentment in the same breath. You begin to notice that the quieter you become, the clearer your desires become too. Some fade away, revealed as illusions of ego. Others deepen, aligning with your soul's direction. The space between wanting and being acts like a filter, removing the noise and revealing the truth of what truly matters. You stop chasing approval and start seeking authenticity. In this sacred space, you meet patience not as passive, waiting, but as peaceful, allowing. You start trusting timing, realizing that what is meant for you cannot pass you by. The more you rest in being, the more life aligns naturally, without force. What once felt delayed now feels perfectly timed. You no longer measure your progress by speed, but by depth. There is also grief in this space, for you begin to see how much of life was missed while chasing more. Yet even that grief becomes gentle, transforming into gratitude. You understand that every unmet desire, every unanswered prayer, carried you here into awareness. You realize that not getting what you wanted was often the way to receive what you needed. As you deepen into being, the concept of enough changes. Enough is no longer a measure of possession, but of presence. You begin to feel rich in simplicity, fulfilled by the smallest moments. The air feels kinder, time less rushed. The world hasn't changed, your way of seeing it has. You have stepped out of the storm of wanting and into the calm of being. You notice now that wanting and being are not enemies. They dance together, one calls for growth, the other for grounding. When balanced, they create harmony. Desire moves you, presence roots you. You no longer run from either side. You simply allow life to flow between both, trusting that each has its season and purpose. The peace you find here is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It simply replaces the restlessness that once filled your heart. You realize that the mind always sought happiness in motion, but the soul always found it in stillness. Between the two lies awareness, the bridge where truth lives. And when you finally rest in that space between wanting and being, you understand something profound. Happiness was never about reaching or resisting. It was about remembering that you were already whole, even while desiring more. In that realization, the chase ends and life begins to flow effortlessly. You no longer need to find peace, you have become it. There comes a moment when the storms within finally grow tired of their own thunder. The thoughts that once collided like restless waves begin to soften, not because life became easier, but because you learn to stop fighting every current. You start noticing the quiet spaces between thoughts, and within them, a peace you had long forgotten. The mind, once a battlefield, begins to feel like a home again, not a place of judgment, but of refuge. The transformation does not arrive with force. It begins with awareness. You start watching your thoughts instead of obeying them. What once pulled you into chaos now passes through like clouds across a vast sky. You realize that the sky never argues with the storm, it simply allows it to pass. That realization alone becomes the seed of calm. The mind begins to learn tenderness, one breath at a time. In gentleness, the mind rediscovers its true strength. You no longer chase perfection in your thinking or clarity in every answer. You allow confusion to exist without panic. The mind does not need to be fixed, it needs to be understood. When you meet your thoughts with kindness instead of resistance, they begin to lose their sharpness. Even pain becomes softer when seen through eyes that do not judge. The gentle mind does not silence emotion, it gives emotion a safe place to land. It listens without labeling, allows without reacting. You begin to see that inner peace is not born from control, but from compassion. Every time you forgive yourself for overthinking, you loosen another knot in your consciousness. Slowly, your mental landscape changes from a maze into a meadow. Gentleness with the mind begins with the courage to pause, to stop analyzing long enough to feel. You realize that most of your suffering was not from what happened, but from the stories your mind told about it. As those stories dissolve, the truth becomes simple again. You begin to understand that stillness is not the absence of thought, it is the acceptance of thought without fear. As your mind softens, so does your life. Reactions turn into responses. Urgency becomes patience. You no longer rush to defend your point of view because you see how little it matters in the larger rhythm of existence. The more gentle your mind becomes, the easier forgiveness feels. You stop needing to win and start longing to understand. That is when you discover peace was never silent. It was simply kind. The gentle mind speaks less and listens more. It watches the world without rushing to define it. You begin to sense that behind every action, even those that hurt you, there is an unseen cause, ignorance, fear, or longing. Understanding this does not excuse the pain, but it frees you from bitterness. You stop carrying other people's storms as if they were your own. A gentle mind does not crave to be right, it craves to be free. It knows that every argument steals from inner stillness. You start choosing peace over pride, clarity over control. The opinions of others lose their grip because you no longer anchor your worth in them. Your mind learns that silence can sometimes heal more than explanation. There's a new rhythm in your thoughts, now slower, steadier, deliberate. You begin to find beauty in simplicity, meaning in pauses. You realize that peace does not mean thinking less. It means thinking differently. Your mind becomes like water reflecting everything clearly, yet disturbed by nothing. That reflection becomes your strength, your unseen wisdom. When the mind becomes gentle, the body follows. The breath deepens, the shoulders drop, the heart beats more softly. You feel the link between your inner state and the outer world. How calmness within creates calmness without. You start to live not from reaction, but from response. Not from fear, but from awareness. The world hasn't changed, only your way of meeting it has. Gentleness does not mean weakness. It takes profound strength to remain kind in the face of chaos, to stay centered while others rush to judge. The gentle mind knows that force can break, but softness bends and endures. You begin to understand that compassion is not a reaction. It is a conscious choice made by those who have found peace within themselves. The mind that once punished you now begins to protect you. It no longer whispers doubts as truth or fears as prophecy. It becomes your ally, not your enemy. You no longer fight your own thoughts. You walk beside them, guiding them back toward stillness. When the mind is gentle, every inner conflict becomes an opportunity for understanding, not self-blame. Clarity returns, not the clarity that demands answers, but the kind that simply knows. You start trusting your intuition again. Thoughts no longer drown your inner voice. They bow to it. You realize that wisdom does not scream, it whispers through peace. And in those quiet whispers, you find direction more accurate than logic could ever provide. Your relationship with the past also begins to heal. Memories that once burned now appear as pages in a finished chapter. You see how even your mistakes carried lessons, and even your regrets taught compassion. A gentle mind does not deny its history, it blesses it. It allows every scar to remind you not of pain, but of growth. The gentle mind is spacious. It has room for contradictions. You can feel sadness without drowning, hope without attachment, love without possession. The extremes dissolve. Balance takes their place. You no longer live in the sharp edges of always and never. You live in the grace of sometimes, where everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. In this spaciousness, creativity awakens. You begin to see life not as a series of problems to solve, but as a canvas to paint. Inspiration visits naturally, without force. The mind no longer demands brilliance. It allows beauty to arise. Every quiet moment becomes a seed of expression, and from that still soil, new ideas grow effortlessly. There is also gentleness in how you treat yourself now. You stop measuring your worth through productivity. You allow rest without guilt, reflection without shame. The mind that once shouted, "Do more," now whispers, "Be here." You learn that true discipline is not pushing harder, it is listening better. Through that listening, peace becomes a habit. Even when chaos returns, as it inevitably will, you no longer collapse. You observe, breathe, and wait. The storms visit, but they no longer stay. The gentle mind is not untouched by life's winds, but it no longer identifies with them. You have learned that peace is not a destination, but a practice, a daily returning to the quiet within. As days pass, you start recognizing gentleness as a kind of wisdom, the ability to stay open in a world that closes easily. You find strength in softness, courage in calm. The noise of life continues, but it no longer defines your inner weather. You walk through the world carrying a silence that others can feel. You realize that your mind no longer frightens you. It feels like walking through a garden after years of living in a storm. Thoughts rise and fall like petals carried by the wind, light, harmless, free. The peace you once chased now lives quietly within you. The mind has become what it was always meant to be, a gentle place where your soul can finally rest. There is a certain stillness that lives within the rhythm of your breathing. You do it thousands of times each day, yet rarely notice how sacred it is. Each inhale is life arriving. Each exhale is life releasing, a quiet exchange between you and the unseen. Somewhere in that repetition hides a kind of joy that words cannot explain. It does not shout or demand. It simply waits for your attention to return. The breath is the simplest reminder of what it means to be alive. It asks for nothing, expects nothing, and yet gives everything. You begin to see that peace was never far away. It has been pulsing through your lungs all along. Every inhale gathers presence. Every exhale lets go of the weight of yesterday. Joy begins not in grand moments, but in the tender awareness of this invisible rhythm. In a world built on speed, breath becomes your rebellion. It slows what the mind tries to rush. It invites patience into places that used to tremble. The act of noticing your breath becomes an act of coming home. No matter where life takes you, no matter how lost you feel, one conscious breath always brings you back to center. The miracle has always been this simple. You begin to realize that happiness was never a treasure hidden in distant goals. It has always lived quietly in what you overlook. When you breathe with awareness, the ordinary becomes luminous sunlight on your skin, the taste of morning air, the softness of a pause. These moments do not demand your success. They ask for your presence. And in that presence, joy returns like an old friend. Each breath becomes a bridge between what is seen and unseen. It connects the noise of your thoughts to the silence beneath them. You begin to notice how the mind softens when it follows the body's rhythm. Breathing reminds you that life is not a problem to be solved, but a movement to be experienced. The more you breathe consciously, the less you resist what is. Breathing teaches surrender better than any philosophy. You inhale not knowing what the next moment holds, and you exhale trusting that it will arrive. This rhythm has been happening since the first cry you made into existence. It does not need instruction. It only needs remembrance. Joy, too, is like that, not learned, but remembered through stillness. When you slow down enough to notice the breath, you discover how intelligent life is. It continues even when you are distracted, forgiving every absence of awareness. You have abandoned your breath countless times, yet it never abandons you. There is grace in that realization, the grace of being supported even when you forget to notice. Through the breath, you meet humility. You understand how small yet sacred your existence is. The same invisible air that fills your lungs has passed through forests, oceans, and stars. To breathe is to share eternity. Every inhalation carries a memory of creation. Every exhalation is a quiet offering back to it. You are part of something vast, yet beautifully personal. The breath also teaches impermanence. You cannot hold an inhale forever, nor can you cling to an exhale. Each must come and go freely. In this rhythm lies the wisdom of letting go, that nothing meant to stay will leave, and nothing meant to leave can be forced to stay. The simple act of breathing becomes a sermon in acceptance. When joy feels distant, return to the breath. Let it lead you away from thought and into being. The mind may wander to problems, but the breath remains faithful. It whispers, "You are still here." That truth alone begins to dissolve fear. You realize that no matter what happens, as long as you can breathe, you are given another chance to begin again. The ordinary breath becomes extraordinary when you see it clearly. You no longer breathe just to survive. You breathe to awaken. Each inhale becomes an act of gratitude. Each exhale a release of unnecessary weight. Life simplifies itself through the lungs. Joy enters quietly. Through the door of awareness you once left closed, you start to feel how breath and emotion dance together. Anxiety tightens it. Peace expands it. By softening your breathing, you soften your world. What once felt overwhelming becomes approachable, even gentle. The breath becomes a mirror, reflecting your inner state, and when you calm it, you transform the reflection. Through mindful breathing, even pain begins to lose its edge. You discover that you can be with discomfort without drowning in it. Each breath becomes a companion in difficulty, reminding you that you are not your suffering, you are the awareness holding it. In that awareness, even sorrow finds space to breathe and eventually transform. When you breathe consciously, you stop needing constant stimulation. You begin to feel wonder in stillness, satisfaction in simplicity. The world around you starts to glow with a quiet magic, a leaf trembling in the wind, the hum of distant rain, the rise and fall of your chest. These become enough. The chase for more begins to fade. Your breath also becomes a teacher of rhythm. It teaches that expansion and release must coexist, that growth requires rest, and stillness allows motion. You no longer force your way through life, you begin to move with it. Like the tide, you flow and return, guided not by urgency, but by balance. In that balance, joy breathes effortlessly. There is something holy about noticing your breath without trying to change it. You realize that peace is not something to achieve, but something to witness. You begin to feel the sacred in the simple, the divine in the mundane. What religion calls prayer, the breath performs in silence, a dialogue between you and existence itself. As you deepen in this awareness, gratitude becomes spontaneous. You do not need reasons to be thankful anymore. Being alive becomes reason enough. The air you breathe feels like a gift, renewed each second. Even ordinary days carry a sense of wonder, because you now live close to what is real. In this simplicity, you understand that joy was never lost. It was only hidden beneath layers of distraction. It lives in the spaces you rush past, in the breaths you take for granted. You no longer wait for happiness to arrive from outside. It blooms quietly each time you return to this moment. Every conscious breath becomes a ceremony of awakening. You inhale life as it is imperfect, unpredictable, beautiful, and exhale every illusion that once blurred your sight. The more present you become, the more radiant the ordinary feels. Life no longer needs to impress you to fulfill you. And when you finally rest in this awareness, you see the truth that was waiting all along. Joy is not something to find. It is something to remember. It has been woven into every breath you have ever taken. The sacred was never far away. It was in the air that kept you alive while you searched for it elsewhere. Now you see it. Now you feel it, joy, hidden in the ordinary breath. There is a strange peace that begins to grow the moment you stop needing to predict the future. For so long, You lived under the illusion of control, believing that knowing what comes next would keep you safe. But life was never designed to be mapped entirely. It was made to unfold. The unknown, once feared, slowly reveals itself as a sacred space where new possibilities breathe. Uncertainty carries its own wisdom. It humbles the mind that insists on answers and teaches the heart to trust beyond logic. The paths you planned often bend into directions your mind could never imagine, yet somehow they lead you exactly where you were meant to be. The not knowing becomes a teacher not of knowledge, but of faith, patience, and surrender. When you release your grip on certainty, a lightness enters your being. You stop rehearsing tomorrow and begin participating in today. The future no longer feels like a weight pressing forward, but a river gently carrying you. In the unknown, you rediscover the quiet excitement of possibility, that perhaps what waits ahead is not to be feared, but welcomed. Every time life surprises you, it reminds you of your smallness in the grand design, and in that smallness lies freedom. You realize that you don't need to control every step. You only need to stay awake for the one you're in. The rest will reveal itself in its own rhythm. This is the beginning of peace, trusting that not knowing is still knowing enough. The unknown strips away the illusion of power, but gives something greater presence. It invites you to listen more, to feel more, to notice the moments you once rushed through. The desire for prediction fades, replaced by curiosity. You begin to see that every day is a question the universe asks, and your only task is to answer with awareness. You start to look back on the times when uncertainty terrified you, and you smile. Those were the seasons that built your depth. The heartbreaks, the detours, the pauses, they shaped your wisdom far more than certainty ever could. You understand now that not knowing was never a punishment. It was preparation. The unknown was carving space for a larger life to arrive. The freedom of not knowing comes when you stop needing every story to make sense immediately. Some lessons are revealed slowly, like the dawn unfolding across a horizon. You learn to wait without panic, to live without guarantees. Each moment becomes a practice of trust, trusting life to move, trusting yourself to meet it with grace. When you live in surrender, something beautiful happens. You become lighter. You no longer carry the burden of constant forecasting. The mind that once built walls of expectation now opens windows of wonder. You realize that clarity often appears after confusion, not before it. And in that patience, you find the freedom to simply be guided. The unknown begins to feel less like darkness and more like a blank canvas. You no longer fear the empty spaces in your story. You honor them as places where new creation begins. Every ending becomes an invitation, every uncertainty a seed. The mind relaxes its grip, and the heart finally has room to breathe. In not knowing, you discover the sacredness of timing. What is meant for you does not arrive early or late. It meets you when you are ready. The struggle to force outcomes begins to fade. You start allowing things to come together naturally. The beauty of divine timing replaces the anxiety of human planning. You realize that the universe has always been on time. This freedom also awakens humility. You accept that life is not always here to satisfy your preferences, but to expand your awareness. What once felt like loss now feels like redirection. You stop labeling experiences as good or bad and begin to see them as necessary. The need for control dissolves, replaced by reverence for the mystery that sustains everything. When the future feels unclear, you learn to find comfort in simplicity. One breath, one step, one honest act at a time. You stop trying to predict the destination and start focusing on walking with integrity. The unknown no longer feels like an enemy, but like a companion walking beside you, whispering, **, trust the next breath, **. There is a kind of joy that only uncertainty can bring, the joy of being surprised by your own growth. You realize that your resilience lives in the spaces where you didn't know what to do, yet kept moving anyway. Each time you met the unknown with courage, life expanded in ways you could never have planned. Freedom also means forgiving yourself for not having all the answers. You stop demanding certainty from your younger self, who was simply learning to live. You see now that mistakes were just experiments, and confusion was proof of evolution. Not knowing was never failure. It was the birthplace of discovery. As you rest deeper into this understanding, you begin to appreciate mystery. You find beauty in questions that have no immediate answers. The mind relaxes, and the heart starts to lead. You learn to dance with uncertainty rather than hide from it. Each moment unfolds like a note in a song, unknown until played, yet perfect when heard. Not knowing teaches intimacy with life itself. It pulls you closer to the present, where the pulse of reality beats. You stop viewing the future as a puzzle to solve and start feeling it as a mystery to experience. Every sunrise feels like an introduction to something you haven't yet understood, and that wonder keeps you alive. The unknown also brings compassion. You begin to see that everyone is walking through some kind of uncertainty. The person beside you, too, doesn't know what comes next. Instead of judging, you begin to relate. This shared vulnerability becomes a bond, a reminder that being human means walking together through the mystery. You realize now that certainty was never freedom. It was a cage built from fear. True freedom lies in openness, the willingness to face what you cannot predict with a soft heart. You start trusting that every moment, whether calm or chaotic, carries a hidden intelligence guiding you toward growth. As you stand in the middle of life's unfolding, you no longer crave to know the next chapter. You feel peace in the space before the next breath, trust in the silence before the next step. You understand that life does not need to be mapped, it only needs to be lived. The freedom you once sought in control was always waiting in the vast, beautiful, uncharted unknown. There are victories that no one sees, quiet triumphs that do not echo in applause. They happen deep within, in the moments you choose peace instead of reaction, understanding instead of judgment. These are the soft victories of the inner world, the kind that rewrite the way you experience life. They do not shout for recognition, they simply transform the soul in silence. You begin to realize that true strength is not measured by what you conquer outside, but by what you reconcile within. Every time you resist the urge to prove yourself, every time you choose kindness when anger would be easier, you win a quiet battle. These moments may pass unnoticed by others, but they are the milestones of your becoming. Soft victories are built on awareness. They bloom in the pauses between thought and response. They appear when you catch yourself before falling into an old pattern, when you breathe instead of react, when you listen instead of defend. The world may not celebrate such moments, but your soul does. Growth rarely announces itself. It simply starts to feel lighter. The inner world has its own language, subtle, invisible, or patient. It measures success not by speed, but by depth. You start to see that your greatest progress often hides in stillness. Healing doesn't always look like motion. Sometimes it looks like finally resting in what is. Each gentle choice for peace is a step toward freedom, even when the world calls it weakness. Every time you forgive without needing an apology, you experience a victory too deep for words. Forgiveness softens the armor around your heart and lets life flow through again. You learn that peace is not given to those who win arguments, but to those who release the need to have one. True strength is the quiet ability to let go and love again. There are days when winning looks like not giving in to despair. You wake up heavy, but still choose gratitude. You carry pain, yet still choose compassion. These are not small things, they are the foundations of resilience. Soft victories are rarely visible, yet they build an inner kingdom that no hardship can destroy. As your awareness grows, you begin to value silence more than noise. The ego longs for dramatic transformation, but the soul finds joy in subtle change. A gentle word spoken in patience, a deep breath taken instead of a harsh one. These are the quiet revolutions that reshape destiny. You begin to realize that evolution is not loud, it's steady. Soft victories also teach humility. You no longer seek validation for your growth. You simply live it. The reward becomes the peace that follows right action, not the recognition it might bring. You stop performing goodness and start embodying it. The less you announce your progress, the more powerful it becomes. The inner world is full of battles, unseen doubts, fears, old wounds whispering from the past. Each time you meet them with awareness instead of escape, you win again. Healing is not the absence of pain, but the presence of understanding. You learn to sit beside your hurt like an old friend, no longer needing to fight it. That is how peace returns through quiet acceptance. There is victory in choosing patience over panic. In the moment when everything feels uncertain and you choose to breathe instead of rush, something sacred unfolds. You begin to see that calm is not passivity, it is clarity. The gentle mind sees further than the hurried one. In that stillness, solutions rise naturally, like light emerging from dawn. Soft victories are invisible to those who only chase outcomes. They belong to those who value process over perfection. You start to feel joy not in reaching a goal, but in how gracefully you walk toward it. The inner world celebrates progress that can't be measured, a lighter heart, a calmer mind, a soul that trusts its own timing. There are moments when choosing to stay kind feels like defeat, but later you realize it was the purest form of triumph. You refuse to let bitterness dictate your truth. You guarded your peace in a world that profits from chaos. That quiet dignity becomes your crown, unseen, yet radiant. Such victories shape a person more deeply than success ever could. Every time you sit in silence instead of distraction, you reclaim a piece of yourself. The world thrives on noise, but you learn that peace thrives in stillness. You stop needing to fill every empty moment with sound or stimulation. In that space, you discover how rich the inner world truly is, full of wisdom, waiting to be heard. Soft victories teach you the art of returning. Each time you drift into old patterns, you come back to awareness without shame. The ego sees relapse as failure. The soul sees it as practice. You learn that healing is not linear, but cyclical, a spiral of remembering. Every return to presence is a victory of its own. You begin to see how your energy shifts when you no longer seek to prove yourself. The need for approval fades, replaced by quiet confidence. You act not to impress, but to align. This shift is subtle, yet it changes everything. When the outer world loses its hold over your worth, you become unshakably free. The soft victories of the inner world cannot be recorded or displayed. They are felt in the way you breathe easier, laugh more often, and forgive faster. You find beauty in imperfection, peace in unfinished moments. You no longer demand life to be flawless. You are content to let it be real. That contentment is its own victory. Even your relationship with pain transforms. You stop seeing it as an enemy and begin to recognize it as a messenger. Each moment of discomfort reveals another layer of truth, another space where compassion can enter. Pain, when met with awareness, becomes a bridge instead of a barrier. Every crossing strengthens the spirit. In the gentle rhythm of daily life, these small triumphs accumulate. You start to notice how much softer you've become, not weaker, but wiser. The need to dominate fades, replaced by the desire to harmonize. You begin to live in tune with yourself, not against yourself. That alignment becomes the quiet song of your existence. The greatest victory of all is realizing you no longer need to win. You are content simply to grow, to understand, to love. The noise of competition dissolves, leaving behind a calm certainty that peace is the truest form of power. The world may not recognize this triumph, but your soul does deeply, silently, eternally. The journey continues not toward conquest, but toward communion. Each day offers another chance to choose awareness, patience, and love. These are the soft victories that shape the unseen landscape of your being. They are the moments that no one will ever applaud, yet they will define your peace forever. Peace is not something you catch by running toward it. It is the gentle visitor that arrives when your footsteps finally rest. You spend years trying to locate it in plans, in people, in promises, yet it hides behind your effort. The harder you search, the more distant it seems. Then one day, exhausted from the chase, you pause, and there it is, waiting exactly where you left it within. The search for peace begins with the belief that something is missing. You move through life collecting experiences, knowledge, and possessions, hoping one of them will silence the noise inside. But peace cannot be chased. It can only be allowed. The more you reach for it, the more it slips through your grasp, because true peace thrives in stillness, not pursuit. You start to see that searching is another form of resistance, an unwillingness to sit with what is. You run from discomfort thinking peace lies beyond it, but it's often buried within it. When you stop resisting the present moment, even your pain softens. Peace does not come to those who conquer their chaos. It comes to those who stop fighting it. The moment you stop searching, the mind unclenches. Its constant analysis, the endless questions of times, why, when, how, times begin to fade into silence. You realize that peace is not a destination after struggle, but the quiet between struggles. It was never waiting on a better life. It was waiting on a quieter you. Stopping the search doesn't mean you give up. It means you surrender the illusion of control. You learn to sit inside uncertainty without needing to fix it. The heart, which once raced to find security, begins to slow. Trust replaces tension. You no longer need life to unfold according to your plan. You begin to feel safe even when you cannot predict what comes next. Peace finds you when you stop arguing with reality. Every expectation you let go of becomes a doorway. You stop demanding that life feel a certain way before you can be calm. The wind still changes, storms still pass, but you no longer beg them to stop. You watch them move through you like weather, knowing that calm always follows. It is not silence that brings peace, but acceptance. You could sit in a quiet room and still be at war within yourself. The noise outside isn't the problem, it's the resistance inside that keeps peace from entering. The moment you stop insisting that the world conform to your comfort, serenity begins to unfold naturally. Peace introduces itself like an old friend you forgot you knew. It speaks softly, without instruction or demand. It doesn't tell you how to live. It reminds you how to be. You realize that peace doesn't change the world, it changes how you move through it. Life remains unpredictable, but you are no longer thrown by every wave. There's a tenderness that arrives with this awareness. You start to forgive yourself for all the times you mistook striving for growth. You understand now that rest is not laziness, it's wisdom. The soul doesn't need constant movement to evolve. Sometimes it needs only to breathe and remember its own rhythm. Peace finds those who no longer make war with their own thoughts. The mind will always generate stories, but you no longer believe every one. You let them rise and fall like ripples across a pond, knowing none of them define the water beneath. Stillness isn't the absence of thought, it's the freedom from being ruled by thought. There is a quiet trust that grows from this way of living. You stop asking, "When will I be okay?" and start feeling okay even without answers. The need for resolution fades. The need to fix yourself disappears. You realize you were never broken, only buried under noise. Peace is what remains when the dust finally settles. Everyday life begins to feel lighter. You move slower, but with intention. You speak less, but with depth. You love without fear of loss, knowing that love itself is never truly lost, only transformed. This is the kind of peace that cannot be taught. It must be lived. It does not arrive as an idea, but as an experience of being fully here. Peace doesn't enter through effort, it enters through openness. When you stop searching, you create space. And in that space, everything you once chased begins to arrive: joy, clarity, ease. You begin to understand that you were never separated from peace, only distracted from it by the noise of wanting. You start noticing beauty again, the kind that doesn't need to impress you. The rustle of trees, the quiet hum of evening air, the pulse of your own breathing, they all remind you of a deeper rhythm at play. This awareness pulls you back into alignment with life's natural grace. You no longer demand miracles because you see them everywhere. There's humility in realizing how simple peace really is. You spent years complicating it with philosophies, rituals, and rules. Yet all along it waited behind the simplest act: surrender. When you finally stop trying to hold the ocean, it surrounds you. That is the irony of peace. It comes only when you stop insisting it must. In this freedom, your relationships change too. You no longer approach others from need, but from wholeness. You give without calculation, listen without defense, and love without fear. The people who once disturbed your calm now become teachers of compassion. Peace doesn't isolate you, it connects you to life, to others, to yourself. The more you stop searching, the more life begins to flow through you effortlessly. Each moment feels less like something to control and more like something to participate in. You begin to trust the intelligence of existence, that everything unfolds exactly as it must. Peace finds you not because you earned it, but because you finally stopped running from it. Even challenges take on a new light. You no longer see them as interruptions, but as invitations to deepen your stillness. Where once you would have reacted, you now breathe. Where once you feared loss, you now sense meaning. The mind softens, the heart expands, and the soul recognizes its own calm reflection in every experience. Peace is not a prize, it's your natural state uncovered. It was never gone, only overshadowed by the search for something more. The moment you stop chasing it, it reveals itself like sunlight behind clouds. You don't need to find peace, you only need to stop believing it's missing. You rest not in resignation, but in quiet understanding. Life moves on, full of uncertainty, beauty, and change. But you are no longer at war with it. The search ends, and the seeing begins. Peace has found you, not because you sought it, but because you finally became still enough to let it find you. There comes a point in every soul's journey when the light no longer feels enough. You begin to notice the shadows you once ignored, the fears, the griefs, the quiet wounds that linger beneath your calm. For so long you tried to escape them, to stay only in the warmth of clarity. Yet, the more you ran from the dark, the stronger it grew. And one day, you realize that what you've been avoiding isn't your enemy, it's your depth. The dark is not here to destroy you, it is here to reveal you. It strips away pretense, comfort, and illusion until only the truth remains. In the dark, you see yourself unmasked, raw, uncertain, but real. The light of awareness can only enter where you are willing to look, and the shadows are where it waits to be invited. You do not conquer darkness, you understand it into stillness. The darkness feels endless. It speaks in the language of fear, telling you that you are lost, that you have failed, that you'll never find your way back. But if you listen closely, its voice begins to change. Beneath its coldness, there is honesty. It tells you what you refuse to hear in the noise of light, the truth about what hurts, what's missing, what longs to heal. The mind resists this meeting because it loves certainty. The dark offers none. It forces you to sit without answers, to trust what can't be seen. But this is where real transformation happens. not in perfection, but in the willingness to face what is imperfect. You start to understand that light is not born from avoiding the dark, but from walking through it. Acceptance doesn't mean you start enjoying your pain. It means you stop denying its existence. When you allow the dark to be present, it begins to soften. The shadows only grow monstrous when you run from them. By turning toward them, you remove their power to control you. You begin to see that peace is not found in banishing the dark, but in embracing it with compassion. Within that acceptance, something sacred stirs. The heart, once tense with resistance, opens. You feel tenderness toward parts of yourself you used to reject, the mistakes, the doubts, the fears. They, too, have been carrying messages all along. The light that follows this acceptance is not blinding. It is gentle, steady, and deeply human. The dark teaches what light cannot: endurance, empathy, humility. It reminds you that strength is not the absence of pain, but the grace to stand with it without losing your center. Every sorrow you've endured has carved a space inside you, and in that space, love now fits more fully. The dark makes room for the infinite. When you stop fighting the dark, you start hearing its wisdom. It tells you that sadness is not weakness, that tears cleanse more than they drown. It shows you how silence heals wounds that words cannot reach. The more you allow these moments, the lighter they become. What once felt unbearable begins to glow with quiet meaning. The light that appears after acceptance is unlike any other. It is not the sharp brilliance of new beginnings, but the golden warmth of understanding. It doesn't erase what happened. It redeems it. You begin to see that everything, even your pain, was a teacher disguised as loss. The dark was never against you. It was shaping you into someone who could hold light without fear. Sometimes the dark appears not as tragedy but as emptiness, a loss of direction, purpose, or faith. It is tempting to fill it quickly with distractions, but emptiness is sacred space. It's the ground where the next truth will grow. You learn to wait without panic, to breathe inside uncertainty. Eventually, that waiting becomes trust. Trust that even the void has a purpose. The more you welcome your shadows, the more balanced you become. You stop pretending to be only light. You allow yourself to be whole, fierce and gentle, joyful and grieving, certain and questioning. The contradiction no longer feels like conflict. It feels like completion. You understand now that true peace is not one-sided. It embraces both dawn and dusk. The dark also teaches patience. Healing does not happen on command. It unfolds when it's ready. You stop rushing to move on and start honoring what still needs to be felt. You learn to sit with your discomfort without needing it to vanish. That patience becomes power, the power to stay present even when life feels uncertain. You start to notice how the dark makes you more compassionate toward others. You see their pain differently now, not as something to fix, but as something to understand. You no longer offer shallow advice, you offer presence. This empathy does not come from knowledge, but from having walked through the same night and survived. In accepting your darkness, you reclaim your authenticity. You stop hiding behind smiles that don't belong to you. You begin to speak truthfully, not to shock, but to heal. There's a quiet strength in being real, in saying, "I don't have it all figured out, but I am still here." That honesty becomes a light for others who are still lost in their own night. There is beauty in brokenness when you stop trying to fix it. Cracks let the light in, but they also let it out. Your scars become proof that pain can transform into wisdom. You start seeing life not as a series of wounds, but as a collection of awakenings. Every ending carries the seed of renewal. Even fear begins to look different now. You see that it was never your enemy, only a guide pointing to the places where love was missing. You stop running from fear and start listening to it. Beneath its trembling voice, you find longing, a longing to be understood. And when you meet it with compassion, fear dissolves back into awareness. The light that appears from this process is quieter than joy, but deeper. It doesn't shout that everything is fine. It whispers that everything belongs. You begin to feel at home in your humanity, comfortable in both sorrow and serenity. The need to escape fades, replaced by the ability to endure and to love what is. When you accept the dark, you also begin to see how it connects you to life's rhythm. The moon needs night to shine. Seeds need soil to grow. Your darkness was not punishment, it was preparation. It taught you to find beauty without perfection and peace without certainty. You realize now that even the night is full of stars. Acceptance becomes a daily practice, not a single revelation. Some days you still resist, still ache, still forget the lessons you've learned, but you no longer judge yourself for it. You understand that growth is not a straight path. It's a spiral that brings you deeper each time. Even your setbacks become sacred steps. You begin to see that the dark doesn't disappear, it integrates. It becomes part of your strength, part of your compassion, part of your wisdom. The same shadows that once haunted you now serve as guides. You no longer ask to be free from darkness. You ask to walk through it with awareness. The light that follows acceptance is steady, not fleeting. It lives not in moments of happiness, but in moments of truth. It accompanies you quietly through every experience, laughter, loss, uncertainty, illuminating not just the good, but the real. You no longer need constant brightness to feel alive. You've learned to see in the dim. There is a grace that lives inside the union of opposites, where darkness and light coexist without conflict. This balance gives birth to serenity. You feel whole, not because you have eliminated your pain, but because you have learned to include it in your peace. The heart no longer divides life into good and bad. It simply beats in understanding. You see what was hidden all along, that the light you sought was never separate from the dark you feared. They were two sides of the same presence, working together to awaken you. By accepting the dark, you did not lose your way, you found it. And in that realization, the world glows quietly, as if whispering, asterisk, you have come home to yourself. There comes a moment when you realize that the peace you were chasing was never running away from you, you were running away from yourself. All those years searching for calm in people, in places, in fleeting escapes, you mistook stillness for something to be found. But calm is not discovered, it is remembered. It was always resting quietly beneath your noise, waiting for your return. At first, calm feels foreign, almost uncomfortable. The mind, so used to motion, resists silence. You sit still, and the thoughts roar louder, the emotions rise higher. But you stay. You breathe through the chaos without trying to control it. Slowly, the storm learns that you are no longer fighting. That's when calm begins to recognize you again, not as a stranger, but as its home. The calm you once chased begins with surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that stops forcing. You stop needing every outcome to bend to your will. You stop needing every question to have an answer. In that release, the tightness around your heart softens. Life begins to flow, and you finally allow it to move the way water moves effortlessly, without resistance. Calm is not an escape from emotion. It is the space that holds emotion without drowning in it. You still feel everything, the ache, the joy, the uncertainty, but now it moves through you like wind through an open field. You no longer identify with every passing feeling. You witness it. The watcher within you is calm itself, unshaken and quietly alive. The greatest shift happens when you stop seeking calm in the world around you and start cultivating it inside. You learn that no environment, no relationship, no achievement can guarantee peace if the mind remains restless. Calm is not found in perfect conditions, It's found in the willingness to stay steady amid imperfection. As your awareness deepens, you begin to see how often the chase was driven by fear. Fear of stillness, fear of uncertainty, fear of being alone with your own thoughts. You thought calm would arrive once everything made sense, but it arrives when you stop needing sense altogether. The calm heart lives comfortably inside mystery. There's a quiet courage in choosing calm over chaos. It's not about indifference or detachment. It's about mastery. You learn to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to think before assuming. The calm person is not emotionless, they are emotionally fluent. They move with life instead of against it. Every time you choose calm, you teach your nervous system a new language, one of safety, trust, and ease. The body remembers peace the same way it remembers pain. Slowly, the old patterns fade. The adrenaline that once fueled your need for control is replaced by gentle awareness. You start existing in harmony with yourself, not in battle. The calm you become is not fragile. It doesn't shatter when things go wrong. It expands. Challenges still come. Storms still arrive. But you no longer lose yourself in them. The world may shake, but your roots grow deeper. You begin to sense that calm is not the absence of storms, but the ability to stand in their reign without losing balance. When you become calm, time begins to change. Moments stretch. The days that once rushed by now feel full. You notice details, the texture of air, the rhythm of footsteps, the pause between sounds. You realize that peace was never about slowing time. It was about being present enough to feel it. Calm is not passive, it's powerful. It allows you to respond with intention rather than impulse. You no longer chase validation or approval. Your choices come from clarity, not urgency. The calm mind doesn't need to shout to be heard, its strength lies in quiet conviction. This is the calm that leads without force. As you practice calm, you also begin to unlearn the idea that chaos equals aliveness. You once equated busyness with purpose, drama with passion, noise with meaning. But now you see how peace, too, can be full of awareness, gratitude, and depth. The calm life is not empty, it is overflowing with quiet beauty. You start forgiving the version of yourself that didn't know this peace, the one who ran endlessly, who mistook rest for weakness and stillness for stagnation. You see now that all the searching was part of the lesson. It taught you how to appreciate what cannot be chased. Without that longing, you might never have learned stillness. Calm brings honesty. It strips away pretense and leaves only what's real. When you stop performing for approval, you discover who you truly are beneath the expectations. The quiet person you become is not someone new. It's the one you were before the world told you to hurry. You begin to notice that calmness changes how others experience you. Your energy no longer adds to the noise, it becomes a refuge. People feel safe around you, not because you solve their problems, but because your presence reminds them of their own stillness. True calm is contagious, it heals without speaking. In this state, even uncertainty feels sacred. You no longer demand clarity, you trust timing. You understand that calm is not knowing everything, but trusting that everything unfolds with meaning. Each unanswered question becomes a teacher of patience, and each delay becomes a quiet act of alignment. Calm teaches discernment. You no longer chase every opportunity or react to every invitation. You sense what resonates and what doesn't. You move slower, but with precision. This restraint isn't fear, it's wisdom. You've learned that peace doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means knowing what deserves your energy. The calm you become also makes you softer toward life. You no longer need to resist what you cannot change. You meet both joy and difficulty with the same open heart. Acceptance becomes your natural posture. Life still surprises you, but the surprises no longer shake your foundation, they deepen your appreciation. Through calm, You rediscover your connection to the present moment. You stop living in anticipation of the next thing. You start inhabiting now fully the breath, the heartbeat, the texture of existence itself. This intimacy with the moment becomes your truest form of fulfillment. Nothing is missing because you're no longer elsewhere. Calm becomes less something you practice and more something you are. It weaves itself into your tone, your movements, your gaze. The mind quiets not because it's empty, but because it's aligned. Your presence begins to carry silence, not the silence of absence, but of completeness. When you become calm, even endings lose their sting. You see them as transitions, not tragedies. The calm heart understands that every closing is a clearing for something new. You stop clinging, stop pleading, stop rushing. You let go with love, knowing that peace cannot coexist with grasping. This calm is not perfection, it's permission. Permission to be imperfect, to rest, to begin again. You learn that peace doesn't demand constant positivity. It welcomes truth in every form. Sadness, joy, fatigue, and laughter all coexist peacefully in the same open space. That inclusivity is what makes your calm real. As your calm deepens, gratitude becomes effortless. You no longer need reasons to feel thankful. Life itself becomes enough. The air, the breath, the sunlight, each is seen as a quiet miracle. You no longer rush to capture beauty. You live inside it. Gratitude becomes not a thought, but a way of breathing. You understand now that calm was never a place to arrive. It was the person you were becoming all along. The journey was not toward peace, but through everything that kept you from recognizing it. You've stopped chasing calm because you have become its steady, aware, unbroken by change. You see the full circle, the one who searched, the one who surrendered, and the one who finally became. The chase is over. The heart is at rest. Life still moves. Storms still pass, but you remain still inside, not untouched, but unshaken. This is the calm you once chased, now quietly alive within you. There comes a time when words no longer need to teach, when silence begins to speak in their place. You have walked through light and dark, through longing and stillness, through questions that once felt too heavy to carry. Yet here you are not as someone who has reached an end, but as someone who has finally arrived within. The journey that began with searching has dissolved into simple being. The truth of happiness, peace, and freedom was never hidden in distant philosophies. It lived quietly in the pauses between your thoughts, in the breath you ignored, in the moments you overlooked while chasing meaning. Life was never asking you to become more. It was asking you to notice what already is. Every chapter you've lived, not just read, has been guiding you home to this realization. You now understand that mastery is not about control, but about harmony. You no longer rush to change what hurts or to hold what fades. You stand at the still center of your own experience, calm, awake, and unafraid of the unknown. The light you sought in others now glows from within, steady and unpretending. It is not the light of perfection, but of presence. The world remains loud, yet you move differently through it. Where you once reacted, you now respond. Where you once feared endings, you now see beginnings disguised in softer forms. The same breath that once carried your restlessness now carries your peace. You have become what you once pursued, not through striving, but through surrender. And so, the story doesn't end here. It deepens. Each sunrise will ask for your awareness, each challenge for your grace, each ordinary moment for your full presence. You are no longer the seeker standing outside the gates of peace. You are the stillness within them. You have learned the quiet art of being truly alive. When you close this book, let the silence that follows not be empty but sacred. Let it echo softly through your thoughts, reminding you that happiness is not something to reach, it is something to return to, again and again. You have not discovered something new, You have remembered something eternal, and in that remembrance you are finally home.